The Edify Show with special guest, Neil Crone. And now, the host of The Edify Show, Elliot Wallach.
Hi everyone, welcome to The Edify Show. This is going to be a fun one. This is with When Hope Calls actor Neil Crone. He plays the hotel owner, Ronnie Stewart, and I've been so excited to talk to him because the other actors keep telling me that he's that guy. He's the fun guy on the set. I'm so excited to meet him. Neil, thanks so much for coming on the program.
My great pleasure. Happy to be here.
So can you describe your character that you play on When Hope Calls?
I play Ronnie Stewart, Ronnie is the proprietor of the Royal Brookfield Hotel, the only hotel in town. He's kind of like the comic relief, I feel, in the cast a little bit. He's kind of a goofy guy who's always trying to make a buck, who's always trying to, make people think he's a little more than he actually is, and that he's somehow above everybody else in town in some way. A bit of a bumbler, a bit of a schemer, but also a heart of gold, I think. Not a mean guy at all, not a mean bone in his body, and actually quite a lovely guy if he can just stop trying so hard. He's a brother-in-law of Tess Stewart, played by the wonderful Wendy Crewson, and it's neat because in those scenes, Wendy is so stern and hard sometimes, and Ronnie's just this sort of fawning little clown beside her,
Yeah, I'm interviewing her coming up, and I'm looking forward to it. And the thing I told her when I talked to her, I thought she just does an excellent job. And I said, same thing with Nick. I said, if you told me to mend a fence or milk a cow, I would just do it. I wouldn't know how to do it. I would just try, because she seems like a real presence. I don't know what she's like in person, but I can tell you that Tess seems like just somebody that you're just going to not want to mess with.
Yeah, I mean, I told her even in season 1 we were talking, and I said, Wendy, you're like Barbara Stanwyck in The Big Valley, just like this tough, no nonsense, beautiful woman,
I feel like the best part of the show is the actors. And that's saying something because the set's crazy. I just felt like the acting, I love that it's ensemble.
Yeah, that may be a big part of the success, the key to the success, I think, of the show, is that it doesn't feel like that there are tiers of talent in the show. It does feel very much like an ensemble, and it's like that way when we're all sitting around, in the green room or waiting to go on stage or waiting to film a scene. We're all just hanging out, and there's no I'm better than you kind of thing, or who's number one on the call sheet. None of that stuff matters. Everybody's just there to do a good scene,
Your cast seems very fond of you. Like I said, I know that Cindy and Chris said that you're the comic relief, behind the cameras too, keeping everybody up.
I've always felt that that's a big part of my job. Not only showing up and doing the work on camera, but almost even more important, Elliot, I think sometimes is being there to keep it fun, and because they're long days sometimes, very long days, and the work can be tough, and it's a lot of waiting around, as I mentioned, and that's the basic thing is I've always just felt so incredibly fortunate to be able to make a living doing the thing that I love more than anything else in the world, and so I'm always confounded when I bump into somebody, on set or whatever, who's doing it, who clearly is not having as good a time as I am. I do. I think it's, if I can do that for the cast and crew, I'm more than happy to do it. It makes my day wonderful, and that energy, I hope, translates onto camera as well.
No, well, it does, totally. I mean, your character seems very, very joyful. It's one of those people that you meet that you're like, man, if I ever even saw that guy cry, I don't think I'd survive it. Just to see, what I mean? To see you upset. And, you've got if somebody looks at your IMDb page, it is, you got like 165,
wow,
if I remember right, different projects in there. And all of this voice work, I only wish my kids were younger. You were in Thomas the Train. Like, I couldn't count how many times I would have been like cooler than, I always say cooler than a submarine commander to even be talking to you. And I think was it Gordon on Thomas the Train?
Yeah, I do Gordon on Thomas and Friends, or All Engines Go, the current cartoon that's running, and the Thomas and the Magic Railroad movie. I had a ball doing that. I myself and my improv buddy Kevin Frank and I did a bunch of incidental voices, and I ended up through a weird stroke of luck doing the voice of Diesel 10, who is the bad guy in the movie, and that was just a ball, and that just launched me into the Thomas stratosphere for fandom and stuff. And I hear from people all the time about that, and that's a ball. That gave me cred with my own kids as well. They were old enough to remember Thomas and stuff, and so they were. That was one of the few times Dad was cool.
No, we couldn't drive by a train without my son pointing at it and yelling Thomas, if it was out in the difference. What does a bad guy Neil Crone sound like? What's a Diesel 10?
Well, the original Diesel 10 voice that we did, if you have time for a quick story, we were in a break in recording these other voices, and they were running some footage on a video, on a television in the studio, that they'd already shot of the film, and it was this picture of this big diesel engine with this pinchy thing on top of them, big crane on top of them. And so, just for laughs, I started to do some improvised dialogue over this character. Like, oh my goodness, I'm going to get pinchy now. If I catch that Thomas, I'm really going to get him, boy. And it was one of those moments where Britt Allcroft, who was sitting behind the board in the other room, who produced the show, hits the talk back and goes, "Say that again." I said, "What? That voice you were just doing, do it again." "Oh, you mean this voice?" She goes, "That's," and they'd been looking for a Diesel 10 voice, and she just happened to hear that and like it. So we recorded the entire film in the Russian voice of Diesel 10, which I thought fit beautifully. She loved it as well. And unfortunately, when they cut the film together and they showed it to preview audiences, some people got cold feet. They didn't want to make a Russian guy the bad guy. So we went back and we redid the entire thing, making Diesel 10 more of a New Jersey kind of guy instead. So he was still kind of bad, but he was just, from the States.
So I was going to ask you what is Diesel 10's nationality, but apparently it was Russian, and then now he's from New Jersey. That's where it landed, huh?
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Do you need like a Sucrets after a day of doing that, or as it?
Yeah, those ones aren't too bad. I've done some voices, and I remember a buddy of mine named John Stalker, one of the king of voices in Canada. He's saying one of those jobs where afterwards you got to gargle with styptic. But no, the Thomas and the Diesel stuff isn't bad. I can do that for a long time. That's not a big deal.
So how did you get into voice work? When did that begin?
I always wanted to do it. Very early in my on-camera career, I pushed my agent to see if I could get into animation and radio. I grew up, loving cartoons, watching. I can tell you every Bugs Bunny cartoon that was ever made, Daffy Duck. I was raised on Warner Brothers, all that stuff. So I was eager to do that, and I'd always sort of been able to do a lot of voices. Growing up, doing sketches and doing assemblies at school. And so I knew this was another tool that I could use to have some fun and make some money at the same time. And so, I've been very lucky to have a great career voice-wise. So, love it. Do you remember,
since you wanted it, do you remember the very first job you booked for doing voice talent?
Oh, that's a good question. It likely would have been a commercial, probably a radio commercial. For the life of me, I can't remember. I do remember the very first cartoon I ever booked. I played. It was called Hammerman, and it was based on MC Hammer, and he would fight crime. And when he wanted to fight crime, he would click his shoes together. He had a left shoe and a right shoe, and they each had voices. I was lefty, and Ron Rubin, my buddy, played the righty, and he would click those shoes together, and he would suddenly boom. He would turn into Hammerman. I don't think the cartoon lasted more than a season, but that was definitely my first voice gig. Yeah.
Do you remember? Was that kind of the first one that was like, okay, I'm doing this now. I'm I've sort of came to what I've been wanting to do, at least in terms of telling my agent that first cartoon, or was there some other moment where you're like, okay, I'm doing this, I'm voice talent now?
Yeah, that was very much what it was like, especially because I was in that room. We recorded that cartoon in an ensemble, so all the actors were there, and that isn't always the case. In fact, they very seldom do that anymore. But I was in the room with guys that were kind of like, voice legends, certainly in North America and Canada. John Stalker was over here. Harvey Atkins, who's no longer with us, was over here. Guys that I had grown up, listening to on TV. So it was a pretty big deal for me.
I love that. I love people. That's one of the things I love about interviewing actors, because they're all pretty brave, bold people. Like, it's not, you really got to believe it yourself on some level, because it's a tough business, and there's a lot of luck involved. And
it is, and it's. And I think the only thing that keeps us going is that thing that I was talking about earlier. Is that there's nothing that you would rather be doing. It's like oxygen to us. And I think if you ask most actors, if you ask most actors, partners or spouses, what are they like when they're not working? We can become bears, because unlike, I don't think plumbers get depressed when they can't plumb. Right, but when actors, have a lull in their career, and you're going to, it's always going to be up and down, and those down moments, you have to have other stuff going on to do, because you can go crazy. It's I think most of us would do it for free. Don't tell anybody that. Right.
But God, there's so much wisdom in that. My dad used to say, if you love the work you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And
it's a great saying, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, I wish he would have lived it, right?
Yeah.
My dad, and I think my dad knew that from experience, because, he didn't like what he did. And I'm a person like you, and they have the Hearties family reunion, and they asked me I'm the Ryan Seacrest, and they asked me to host it, and so I enjoy being funny. I enjoy affecting people. That's basically it. I like affecting people. But my wife gets asked 1,000 times, oh my gosh, you just must laugh and laugh. And I'm sure your wife is probably the same, like always. They just think you're just.
Yeah, and she always shakes her head. He's so quiet at home, and I am. I tend to be very introverted. I love a small dinner party, and I love to shine in those moments. But if I go into a big party or something, whatever, I'm the quiet guy in the corner usually.
I always find that shocking when I hear people like that, and I've always gravitated to the quiet guy in the corner, because I always feel like there's buried treasure there, and you definitely would have been one of those guys. Like, all of a sudden I come up to you and I'm like dying, hearing all your stories. That's one of the things I really appreciate you just taking this time to share your life with me, because I find it interesting. First of all, like you said, in high school, you were attracted to these people doing this voice work, and then here you are doing voice work. That is so cool. I mean, so many people don't do that. How did that work for you? Did you go right from high school, like, I'm pursuing this, or did you kind of go off the rails and then come back on, or how did it go?
Yeah, I think I was kind of always there. That wanting to do it. I had a buddy in high school, still a good pal of mine, Bill Keenan, who we did comedy together in high school. We did assemblies and sketches. We did some stand-up together afterwards. We went to university together at what was then known as Ryerson University for Radio and Television Arts. So we were 3 more years in front of the camera and writing stuff and doing radio. And then when I graduated from that, I wasn't really sure what came next. I didn't really have a hand in the small of my back saying, go this way or pursue this. My parents were lovely people, very loving people as well, but they didn't really come from a show business background or anything. And I think they kind of, quietly wanted me to get a nice secure job. And so I went and got my teaching degree, and I taught high school for 3 years, drama and English. But the whole time I was doing, I was taking improv workshops at night and doing improv shows at night. And so at the end of my 3rd year of teaching, Second City hired me at that point in time to join the touring company. And so I did 3 years of teaching before I was finally invited to do this full time. So it took me a while to sort of, get the courage up or to see which direction I needed to be heading in to do this thing, or if I even could do it. I didn't know anybody who was in show business, so it was kind of hard that way.
I have to imagine you would have been that teacher, that unforgettable. There must have been weeping and gnashing of teeth when you left after those 3 years, and in the teacher's lounge. Like, was it like that? I mean, there had to be some kids going, God, no, Mr. Crone, you can't stay.
Happily, I think that there were. I know myself on the first morning that I didn't go in to teach, I was in tears at home. So worried that my kids were with somebody else and would they be looked after and whatever. And those kids, and I was so young. I was 25, and I was teaching kids who were then at in grade 13 up here, so they were 18 and 19 years old. So we weren't there wasn't much of an age gap, and we've remained friends to this day. Many of us, they're all. It amazes me and chagrins me to think that they're all in their 50s now, with fully grown families and stuff. But but it was a great time. I've been very lucky to have two careers in my life that I really super enjoyed both. Loved them.
Yeah, those are the moments that I'm really into. The idea that you're a teacher but you're still at night, you're still pursuing your dream, and then Second City, which in my comedic mind, that's big time prestige. That is so cool. And what did that feel like when you went on to Second City from teaching? Because it had to be the dream. It had to be somewhat bittersweet, but mostly sweet, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, I joined the touring company, and I was in great company in the touring company. My roommate was Colin Mockery, and Colin and I became fast friends, still are. And it was fun. It was kind of a romp. We went right across the country in a little van, and doing shows left, right, and center, learning our craft. But for me, the really big thing, and the thing that that was super nervous and supercharging was, after 6 months in the touring company, getting the invitation to join the main stage cast in downtown Toronto, which Colin and I both went together. And Ryan Stiles was in that cast as well, and that was great. That to me really felt like a big deal. I felt like I had, quote unquote, made it at that point in time. I remember doing a show down there, and again, my parents, had never pushed me or never even really encouraged me much in terms of the acting thing, and so I always kind of wondered how they felt about it. Until one night, the entire family and my extended family came down to see a Second City show. And I looked down at the front, and the entire front row was my family, and I could hear my dad laughing, and I hear my mom laughing, and I was just like, man, did that ever feel good? Yeah, it was validation in terms of my parents really super approving of what I was doing. I was going to be okay now,
Thanks for sharing that one. Boy, I want the movie rights to that moment. That had to. So would you say that it was a lot of your voice work and your accent? Like, what was your secret weapon when you'd get into the improv?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a sense of play. I had a director for a comedy show that I did once, and he very kindly referred to me. He said, the reason I'm hiring you is because when I watch you on stage, it's like you have a circus in your head. And I was so flattered by that, and I've taken that to heart. And I think that's sort of at the core of what I tried to do on stage, was just always be super playful, and to be open to anything on stage. And that really is the whole philosophy of improvisation, which is, we could talk for hours about that too, because that to me is life-changing. But just being, saying yes to everything that you're handed on stage or in life, for that matter. And just run with it and see where it takes you until the next offer comes along to say yes to. So yeah, I've always just been super attracted to the play aspect of improvisation,
Yeah, and I think it sounds like that's extended just to your normal everything, to your job, to any job that you're having fun. Yeah, that was one of the cool things. Like I say in that video, my work is my play. It's so. There's an interview that I did for this woman that created this movie, Bonhoeffer, and she ended up going to New York. She couldn't. If you're ever curious, and like your video, but it just doesn't have the views of how important that video is to me. And what happened was she thought she was going to be huge. She went to New York and she just got destroyed for a year. And somebody said, you need to go to an improv class to get your confidence back. And then that's where she ended up doing that for 5 years, and then ended up getting one audition that changed her life. Didn't know anything about it. It was for puppets.
Wow.
And she's a woman of a very devout faith. She went there just to see if she could share her faith. And she gets there and she keeps winning and winning and winning until all of a sudden she's sitting down with this guy, doesn't know a lot about him. And he's like, do you want to do this kind of work? And she says, I'll tell you something, Jim Henson. I don't know a lot about your work. I've seen an episode, I think it's of the Sesame Street. And he ends up hiring her and like personally trains her. And she's like on Sesame Street for like, it completely radically changed her life.
Wow.
And like you say, and I think there's just something to improv that must give you guys some kind of access to something that is life changing, I think.
I completely agree. Yeah, I completely agree. And I've taught many improv workshops as well, and to actors and to business people. And it doesn't matter. It makes no difference who's in the class. It's still life changing for them. You see them. I'm a big believer in was it Picasso said, that we're all born artists and we're all born creative, and I really believe that. And I think people put that on hold, and they close that part of themselves off if they think of themselves as something else. I'm not an actor. I'm a businessman or whatever. But when you take them through an improv workshop and they learn the basics of improv, and then they see themselves on stage and they're creating things and they're getting laughs, it's transformative. And I tell everybody I meet, that wants to be more creative or wants to have more fun, take an improv class. You will not regret it for a second. It will do nothing but benefit you. It's been that important of a thing in my life. And some of my oldest and dearest friends, coincidentally, I made, while I was improvising or taking improv classes.
You know what? I'm going to do it. I'll send you an email. I don't know where it'd be in Spokane. I mean, we have, I think, an Arby's now. Maybe we have an improv class.
Absolutely.
But I do like that kind of thing. I'm so curious with, what you like. Like, do you like one of the things I'll tend to do is when people like prank calls, I get a lot of solicitors. Do you do any of that? Or is it only something that you do on the outside, or do you entertain yourself when you're home and with that?
Yeah, I don't know about that so much. Yeah, I mean, if I'm with a bunch of people, then we'll hang out, we'll have fun and do that kind of thing. But I find all actors too tend to be very chill people most of the time. Unlike I would say, and I think there's a very big difference between improvisers and stand-up comics. Stand-up comics are very, very different people, and they're like lone wolves. And I doff my cap to them because I think it's one of the most difficult things in the world to do. Whereas improvisers are more about, it's all about sharing. It's all about how can I make you funnier on stage? What can I offer you? Whereas stand-ups are they're sort of like sharks, and they're super smart. But it's all the high praise from a stand-up comic is just this kind of thing. Very funny, man.
They're not even laughing. They're not even laughing, but they're like, that was funny.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking. I swear you and Viv have to get together because Viv, if you don't, he plays the Joseph Canfield. He's the pastor, on When Calls the Heart. But he did stand up, and he talked about something too, like you're saying. It's so similar. It's an interview. Oh, here, I'll do another link. Go watch my Viv interview. But my, where we talked about he went and did stand up, and he said the thing with stand up, he said a lot of these guys are really doing comedy through some kind of real struggle. That they're kind of going through some kind of a darkness. He's like, I just didn't have any of that.
Yeah. There's a lot of pain involved, I think, for a lot of them. Not all of them, obviously, but yeah, it's a different animal entirely. But prior to that, I had done some stand-up, like some actual club stand-up. When things were quieter for me as an actor, and I wanted to explore the stand-up thing, and I enjoyed it. But I didn't love it, and I found it to be an enormous amount of work. Whereas improv has never felt like work to me for a second. stand-up I found was, man, again, I have infinite respect for those dudes and dudettes, because it's hard. It's hard. To make it look easy is tough. You can do the same show, and this happened to me many times. You do it 2 nights in a row, and the material kills on one night, and then mysteriously the next night bombs. So it's just like, that's what they're dealing with. It's crazy.
And it's hard for you not to take that and internalize it like it's me.
Yeah. How did I blow that? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Is it like that with improv as well, or is the audience kind of arrive kind of more ready to be entertained? And
to me, the beauty of improv is the transparency of it. I think audiences they have the best time when they can see you fail on stage, but still be having a ball doing it. When they see you dying, or the scene is not working, but you're having so much fun up there, that just delights them no end. So,
right.
Yeah, I think the best improv is the stuff where it's clearly some things are going to be, hitting it out of the park, and other times you're going to be struggling. But as long as the audience can see the struggle and see you having fun during that, well, you can't lose.
So to transition back over to When Hope Calls, is there that much improv that you're able to do, on the set, or is it pretty much you just go to the line? Because it seems like with you, what a waste if you're not having the opportunity to bring something when you can.
I'm very lucky. Alfonso is a very dear friend, and what he writes for my character to begin with is marvelous. I'm always so excited when I get his scripts, but he's also very cool about me embellishing a little bit. And if I feel like it's something that Ronnie would say, then he's happy to hear that or see that. And we've been blessed too with directors who are also flexible that way. And if there's something that I can tweak to make it just a little more entertaining somehow, then they'll certainly give me a take to do that. And then as long as we do one by the book, we can also play with it a little bit. So I'm very, very lucky that way, and that I'm given that latitude.
Right. How does When Hope, because with such a career, how does When Hope Calls compared to a lot of your work? I mean, how does, what's the set like? What's been the experience like for you?
It's been an absolute ball. I love it. I love traveling up to North Bay where we shoot, and it's and the little town they've built for us in this gorgeous pasture is fantastic. The cast are just wonderful. As I said, their attitudes are great. Everybody's so happy to be there. Our directors are wonderful people, our producers. And I know it sounds like I'm blowing smoke up everybody's script, but it really is a very joyful place to be, right down to the trailers, And it's also, it's just geographically, it's spectacular up there. When we shoot sometimes into the fall, this little meadow that we're in is surrounded by forest, and it's just on fire with color, and it's quite wonderful. And I also, I get to work with horses a lot, and I'm a huge animal guy, and so I like to hang out with Rick Parker. Rick is our animal wrangler and stuff, and he always lets me hang out with the horses and stuff. So it's there's no downside. I gotta tell you, it's pretty nice.
That's been the consistent theme with everybody. It's almost like Wind Calls the Heart in some kind of weird alternate universe or something. It's like, because everybody says the same things that I've been hearing from Wind Calls the Heart since season 1, and it's just this magical cast that comes together, magical experience. I would have never thought they'd ever make something like a Jamestown, and then for you to actually have this town that's already there.
Yeah.
In your career, how often do you ever see that? And then you got to feel like you put your outfit on and you're like, it's hard not to believe you're in the
and that's the other cool thing about it too, is interesting you would touch on that. Because it is a period piece. When you put that stuff on, it's a little transformative. You look at yourself in the mirror with that hat on and stuff, and it's like, wow, this is really cool. So
yeah, I'm really looking forward to coming up there, and because normally we would be doing a lot of this on the set, and I tease that you've got. Oh yeah, normally I'd love it. It's be a little bit more of a trek than we've done with the Jamestown. And when Jocelyn Houdon, when she was on, we interviewed her on Wind Calls the Heart before, right? And yeah. I saw her in the green room as we were getting ready to promote When Hope Calls, and she came up to me and she said, when the EPK crew came up, I thought it was you guys. and I couldn't really remember what you looked like, but I thought it was you guys, and I was really excited. And I ran up and gave them a hug, thinking it was us. I'm like, wow, they're really friendly, up here. But she was terrific. But yeah, to go back, I tease that it's like you've got Chris, you got the occasionally Jesse Hutch, you got Nick, who's a 4-time world champion martial artist. Then you got the Trevor Donovan. I think it's the safest set in the nation of Canada.
It probably is. And it's so funny too because Chris is such a big guy too. When RJ was our first Mountie, and he was pretty good sized guy, but Chris is a wall of a guy, and I'm like 5'8", and Nick as well. Nick's even bigger than Chris, I think. So when I'm in a scene with those guys, I'm like just I'm like doing one of these.
Yeah. It's like you're back in junior high. Yeah. One of the reasons there's several that I really wanted to interview, but one of the things I do is I start researching people. And I found a video that everybody has to watch. I'm going to put a link to it. You might have forgotten doing it. I thought it was so deep and so vulnerable and authentic. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I'm not sure I do.
You did it out in the lawn, and it's quite short, but you really talked about Neil Crone's philosophy on work and play in your life. And first of all, I love stuff like that. I love people like that. I love depth. I love humor. You know what? You've got to find Viv Leacock, and you two need to go bowling, because he is the wind calls the hearts and Neil Crone. Okay. He even did stand-up comedy like you did, and you don't even remember making that, huh?
I think I do. I think it was in my backyard in a little town called Port Perry, where I used to live. Yeah, I think I remember that. Yeah,
I don't even know. You're going to be the first one I've ever done this to. It's like, the link's right here. Like, I see guys do that. I'm going to figure out how to do that. It's really good. There are just a lot of life lessons to it. And it's about it talked about your spirit of just wanting to be gentle and doing no harm. And what's something that might surprise people about you?
Oh, something that might surprise people. I think it might be the fact that I actually am quite quiet. I'm rather introverted, and I spend a lot of time, maybe too much time, in here, in the interior world. And I think some people may be surprised that that's sort of my comfort zone, as opposed to being, hey, Ronnie Stewart all the time. So that might be one of the things I think that might surprise folks.
I'm going to surprise you. I'm going to tell you what your absolute favorite thing to do is.
Okay.
You can tell me if I'm right or wrong, okay? It's reading.
Yes, it is. Dango. How'd you know that?
Because it's in your video.
Oh,
But for a moment, I wanted you to think I was clairvoyant. I just wanted to have that experience. And it was nice. It was everything I hoped it would be. So since that video was done so long ago, I'm curious, do you still read quite a bit?
I read constantly. I have a Kindle, which I love because I can take it with me whenever I travel or I go to set or whatever. And I have probably 1,000 books loaded on that thing at any given time. It's just one of my favorite things. I mean, I live up here on the beach, and one of my favorite things in the summertime is to take my paddleboard and an umbrella and go to the beach, and I literally will spend an entire day either just reading, and then go up for a paddle and come back and then read, and it's pretty nice. But I guess I guess that plays into that interior life thing that I was talking about earlier.
You figure that this whole thing began with Jeanette Oakes writing, from Wind Calls the Heart, and she's Canadian. This sweet lady started her first book, I think she published at 42, and ended up publishing over 30 million books.
Wow.
This little old lady. Yeah. Just incredible. And so there's some real people that are big readers. Where would the show be without readers? Because that's where it all began. So I'm curious, what is to you the greatest book written? The one that you think is just the best, like the no miss. You've got to read it. If one comes to mind.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, The one book would be my favorite book of all time, probably. The one book that I actually make a point of rereading would be Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. Yeah, it is for me. And incidentally, it's also one of my favorite films. I mean, I think it's one of the few times where a film version of a book was as good as the novel. But that would be it for me, I would think. I have others that are up there, but that's my go-to, I think. I have nonfiction titles that I will go back to occasionally, and reread things that I find are, philosophical or spiritual texts that, have important messages in them that I keep forgetting, that I have to sort of reread and take comfort from those as well. But for fiction, yeah, it would be To Kill a Mockingbird.
Wow. So with When Hope Calls, When Calls the Heart, they just announced that they're going to do a 13th season.
Fabulous.
And and I've always believed that When Hope Calls could be When Calls the Heart if he just got that chance. There's no show out there that's a comparable to When Calls the Heart except the 6 episodes coming for When Hope Calls. Mm-hmm. Regardless of what network it's on or anything else. And that's where I really want to encourage people to really support this, because we need a lot more programming to bring, it's a family magnet, right? To bring the families together. Yeah. What do you hope that When Hope Calls accomplishes, or your work accomplishes through When Hope Calls?
Well, for starters, I've literally said this to some of our producers, Brad and David, and I've said, I want to ride this show into the sunset. It's like I would happily play this character for another 15, 16, 20 years. Just do that. But more than that, though, I think it's the kind of show that, and my wife and I have had this kind of discussion many times, because she's a huge heartie as well. And that you get tired of watching stuff where people are just getting beat up or killed or whatever, this thing, and it's just violence upon violence, and it's titillating, but it does something to you as well. And I think shows like When Calls the Heart and When Hope Calls, they resonate with people in a different way, in a way that makes you, there's a reason you cry when you watch shows like that, or the reason you smile when you watch them, because there's a part of you that wants life to be like that. And I think that's a good message to put out there, that it can be that way. We can certainly approximate it or come closer to it if we just treat people with kindness and respect and love, and those things sound corny, but man, they're kind of the cornerstone of who we are as a species,
No, for everything that you just said, which was so wonderfully put, I'm desperate to see the show continue. May it continue where you're not 20 but 30 or 40 years. You can look like the Crypt Keeper on When Hope Calls. But I just think like the way your career began, I think you have so much that people can learn and that you can teach on and off the camera. And I look forward to getting to know you over those 30 years. And
I hope so.
Yes, thank you so much for being on the program. I look forward to hopefully seeing you many times to come.
Elliot, my great pleasure, my friend. Thank you for making it an absolute joy.
Okay, you guys, you can watch When Hope Calls. You can find it on the Great American Family Channel, Great American Pure Flix. Just go to whenhopecalls.com for an easy way to find out how you can watch it. And thank you so much again to Neil Crone for being on the program. He summed it up perfectly. Really want to encourage everybody to support When Hope Calls. And we'll see you guys next time on The Edify Show.
Don't forget to tune in to Hearties TV Tuesday. Elliot will be interviewing Jacob Shumay on the set of When Calls the Heart. You won't want to miss it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And never miss a thing when you subscribe to hearties.com, where people around the world are coming together to support inspiring entertainment. And we'll see you next time on The Edify Show.